Welcome to the review video for quiz number 3 in Old Testament chronology. Let me start by going over what the quiz entails, and then we'll talk about what kind of questions are on the quiz. First of all, there will be a short answer section, 10 short answer questions. Then there will be a section of true and false. Then there's some multiple choice questions. I even threw a couple bonuses on there to help you out, and so you probably will appreciate those. All right, let me go over some of the information that will be on there. Of course, we talked about the idea of Cain and Abel. We talked about their sacrifices. We mentioned that Cain brought a sacrifice that was fruit, the best fruit that he had. We talked about the fact that really illustrated he was trying to be right with God based off the fruit of his good works. Of course, we know Abel brought a lamb, which is a picture of Jesus Christ. We talked about the lineage of Cain. We mentioned several different people and their names. One of the men that we mentioned was Lamech, who was the first polygamist and also the first serial killer. And so quite a bad man. By the way, 7th generation from Cain, pretty bad man. Of course, we know Enoch was 7th generation from Adam and a very good man. And so we see Cain's 7th generation, very bad. Adam's, Seth's lineage, the 7th generation from Adam, a very good man. We also mentioned Lamech had a couple of sons that were very innovative. We had Jabal, the father of ranchers, Jubal, the father of music, and Tubal-Cain, the father of metallurgy. We mentioned several of the line of Seth, and we mentioned, of course, Enoch, 7th generation from Adam. He was the first preacher really mentioned in the Bible, and he had a two-part message. First part of the message was, you better get right because judgment's coming. Of course, talking about Noah's flood. He named his son Methuselah, which his name means after this, the judgment. The Bible tells us in the book of Jude that Enoch also preached about the second coming of Jesus Christ, which is amazing because that hasn't even happened yet. We also mentioned, of course, Methuselah, who is Enoch's son. He is the oldest man that ever lived. He lived to be 969 years old. Of course, another famous man in the line of Shem was Noah. And of course, Noah's daddy named him Noah because he said he will give us rest from our labors. And Noah's main name means rest. All right. We also talked about Genesis chapter 6 and some of the oddities there and discussed that. What happened when the sons of God came to the daughters of men? Well, the product of that relationship was giants and men of renown. And of course, we talked about the different theories and ideas about that. We also mentioned, of course, the unfortunate event in which Ham saw the nakedness of his father Noah. We mentioned kind of a peculiar thing. When God cursed, made the curse, he didn't actually curse Ham. He cursed Canaan, which was Ham's fourth son. And of course, that was the curse that came on the Canaanites. We mentioned different flood legends. We talked about the fact that there are over 270 flood legends mentioned in history. We gave you several of them, but some of the important ones, of course, was the Toltec Indian flood legend from Mexico. Of course, we mentioned the fact that the Toltec Indians said that the first world lasted 1,716 years. And that wasn't too far off of Usher's number, about 60 years difference. We also mentioned the fact that the Toltec Indians also talked about a great tower being built after the flood, once again matching the Tower of Babel. Of course, we mentioned probably the oldest of the flood legends, the Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh. And of course, that is a very famous flood legend as well. And then we mentioned an interesting king, King Sennacherib. And we mentioned the idea that his temple, the temple of Nisroch, was actually dedicated to a plank of wood. And some folks, there are some legends that say that King Sennacherib actually saw Noah's Ark, and that is why he worshipped the god Nisroch. All right. We talked about some of the line there of Shem. And we mentioned several different people. Of course, Eber was one of his lineage. He is the person we think that the name Hebrew came from. We also mentioned Peleg, in which the earth was divided. We talked about the different ideas, whether it was Noah dividing the earth amongst his children and grandchildren, or whether it was the water coming up and dividing the different continents out. We mentioned several things there, or the fact that the Tower of Babel happened maybe during that time, and so the languages were divided. We also talked about Nimrod, who was the founder of Babylon and several other places. Of course, he was the mighty hunter before the Lord, and also the instigator of the Tower of Babel. We talked about all the lineage all the way up to Abram. Of course, Abram's father's name was Terah, and Terah actually brought Abram and that out of their home city of Ur of Chaldee, but didn't go, he went to Haran and stopped. They didn't go all the way to Canaan. Of course, it was God who told Abram to leave your family. And it's interesting, the word Terah means delay. And really, Terah was a delay for Abram, doing what God said for him to do. We mentioned the fact that Abram was born 2008 years after creation. So it's kind of nice, about 2,000 years after creation, Abram was born. We also talked about the patriarchal stage and talked about Abram. Of course, we mentioned that stage spans 370 years. We mentioned the fact that God gave Abram a covenant in Genesis chapter number 12. And we talked about some of the travels that Abram had. Of course, he went to Egypt because of a famine. And of course, we mentioned that wasn't something that God told him to do. That's probably where he picked up Hagar and got into a little bit of trouble there. We also mentioned the fact that Lot, at that time, decided to go and live in the area of Sodom and eventually ended up in Sodom. We mentioned the fact that there was a king who went against the kings of Sodom, and his name was Chedorlaomer. And of course, before he went against the kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, and those other guys, Chedorlaomer did something that actually would have helped Abram's people many years later get the land. He wiped out a lot of the giants that were in the land of Canaan. We also mentioned the fact that after the battle in which Abram defeated Chedorlaomer, Abram gave tithes to Melchizedek, king of Salem. Melchizedek is also the very first mention of the word priest. He's the very first priest mentioned in the Bible, and we thought we mentioned the fact that probably is a pre-incarnate picture of Jesus Christ. That is really a pretty good review of what is on this quiz. Hopefully you'll study hard. We'll see you on Thursday.